the Higgs world. We bring interesting research forward and make it accessible to everybody. Because research is beautiful. Today, we are going to learn about flying squirrels. Safi is going to walk us through her paper and her fieldwork she executed in Malaysia. This story is going to be split into two parts. The first one covers the research subject itself, and the second part covers her fieldwork and the team she built, experiences she had with local population there who helped her in executing the research. So enjoy and do share this story and this paper with your friends. The link will be provided below. And if you know anybody else who wants to get featured and is interested in sharing their research story, sharing their papers, do let us know. Enjoy and thank you. So thanks, Safi, for finding time to meet us. Your paper is amazing. I didn't know squirrels were so exciting to research and learn about. First of all, difficult to find, especially in the forest areas where you have been researching these. So amazing paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link of your paper in the description of the video. And then I really urge everybody to kind of read the paper. It's fascinating. You know, you can think of what squirrels can do and how they help the habitat. And it's amazing research subject that you've chosen, Safi. So thank you again. Maybe we just start with tell me about you. Why do you like the research, this subject? Tell me about your team. What motivated you, so that everybody else can get motivated about the work you do and maybe research on squirrels.
So for my master's, I decided I wanted to look into nocturnal mammals. And I thought I would have a look around. I really like tropical nocturnal mammals. So, you know, your slow lorises, your tarsiers. And I met Dr. Priscillia Miard, and that's like literally her specialism. She's an expert. She now works in Sabah, and we decided to do a nocturnal mammal survey. And so we went to the Rainforest Discovery Centre in Sepilok and did like a 2-month survey there to see what we could see, really. And actually, we do know what's there to a point because the guides do night walks there and, you know, there's staff there, but no one's really there as late at night as I wanted to be. So we thought we'd see what we could see and if they were there were different animals, and there's loads of flying squirrels there. So flying squirrels are particularly cool because you have quite small ones and then you have the big ones. And there have been 4 species in Sabah recorded of these large flying squirrels. And so during my survey, I actually saw 3 of these species. We unfortunately didn't see the 4th. We don't know if that means it's not there or, you know, maybe it's a different part of the forest. We don't know that yet, but we did see 3 of them. And so I wrote up my master's thesis, which, you know, involved a lot of different things about our survey methods, and we did some stuff to do with tarsiers and their sensitivity to light. But also we found as I was doing this research and I was doing this write-up, I had just loads of tidbits of information on the black flying squirrel and the red giant flying squirrel, and also I had a couple of observations of the Thomases. And I thought, you know, there's so little out there on these flying squirrels that even just bits of data could help, you know, push for funding, push for more research. And what also played into that is that our local guides, you know, they're very used to these squirrels. And one time, my research assistant, JT, he heard one and he was like, we got to go get it, because he knew we could get a recording of it.
Hmm.
because I have like a very expensive recorder, so I could get a decent quality recording. And I managed to get this recording of this black flying squirrel. And I'm sure plenty of people in the world have heard it before, but it's never been recorded before that we know of. So I I ran to this area where we could hear it and I watched it. I could see it and I recorded it. And we were like, this has to get out there. We need people to know that we've just got so many gaps in data on flying squirrels. We know some of them make calls. I mean, a lot of people know that anyway, but like if you look at published data, it's very gaps in the knowledge. So that's really what motivated us to do a paper on flying squirrels and then push for further flying squirrel research as well.
That is super. Like it feels like a movie where you heard something, how to go and film it and record it. It's like, you see all these mummy movies when you're growing up. Like it feels like that. Oh, I found a mummy. Yeah, it's flying squirrel. So
Yeah,
this is so exciting. It feels like, you're taking us in a journey of discovery, right? Of flying squirrels. Now, like flying squirrel. I mean, like when I grew up, like we've seen squirrels. Like we've never seen flying. A lot of people haven't seen flying squirrels. So first of all, like why are they important? Like what's different about them? And I know like the paper in the paper you mentioned local extinction. So there are some local phenomenons which happen in particular areas. Maybe it's localized extinction happening in that region. That could be one. So first of all, like why should one study flying squirrel? That's one. And how important are they? What do they tell us about the ecosystem? Are they precursors? They tell about what's going to happen and change in habitats for them and for others and for the ecosystem. So how important? Why should we study them?
well, flying squirrels are quite cool because of all the squirrel species, they're the only nocturnal ones. So that's something that's just immediately fascinating because they have filled a niche by evolving to be in the night rather than the day. And so that also poses a question of what are they doing in the ecosystem at night? Most forest processes actually happen during the night. And so nocturnal studies are super important. And knowing that you have an animal that a species that is active at night, like what are they doing for it? And that's what we really want to ask. And we want to know because we don't know a lot about them. We know that lots of squirrel species are seed dispersers. And in a forest, a seed disperser is usually crucial for lots of different plant species, managing to survive. A lot of these squirrels are, it's, it's dependent on which squirrel species you look at, but flying squirrels are often foliivores, so they often eat certain plants and plant parts. And we want to know, like, why is that beneficial? And does that actually help the trees? Like, which ones are they choosing? And also, like, um, some of them may eat fruits as well. And, we need to do a detailed study on them. There are other species that will have different diets. They've been shown to eat fruits in other species. And obviously, eating fruits usually means that they're probably a seed disperser. Um, Eating the plants, obviously, the same concept. So they must play an important role in the ecosystem. We might even be able to tell the ecosystem health from where the squirrels are focusing on their food sources. So it really is, I think, they're quite an important species to study. Local extinctions, well, it's a tricky one, really, because you don't always know if they've gone extinct there or if they were there to begin with. With some species, we know because we have records of them being in certain areas before and then no longer, but there's just so little flying squirrel research, particularly in Sabah, that we just don't know necessarily. And part of researching is finding out where their suitable habitat is. And if we can work out whether they should have been somewhere before or if there's more suitable places so that we can make sure the population stays stable.
Yeah, I like it. The, the whole fun about this is we don't know. I think, and that kind of is
Yeah.
really interesting, right? Because we don't know, we need to find answers. And I think one of the things that you have detailed in your paper is the hard work that is required to find an answer. Like, you need technology, you
Hmm.
need people. You got to sit at night. You sat there for so many hours with your team, and you got, few readings, right? So it's very hard to even actually document even little data that you can get and actually kind of
Hmm.
provide some semblance of synopsis or of conclusions, right? It's still a work in progress, I understand, but still it's a path,
Yeah.
it's a moving target, and we're getting there, right? That's the fun part. So I think the technology piece and the whether you use acoustics or cameras, that played an important role in reaching to the conclusions in your paper. So explain a little bit about like what did you need to get there? How did the local environment? I think there was some local help, local knowledge that you mentioned that
Hmm.
really helped. So how did all the things come together? Because there are a lot of things that are moving parts. They all have to come together to kind of produce the results and get some readings. So how did that work out for you?
Yeah, so I think technology is like advancing obviously quite fast these days. And what we found is with nocturnal monitoring, it's just difficult. It is just difficult. It can be dependent on where you are, safety thing. It's hard to see. That's also just, we aren't nocturnal actually. But so technology is really important. And actually, what I think is super important from all the stuff I've researched and looked up, and when we were designing the study, is that you're trying to get as much data as possible. And so the synergy of using multiple technologies, I think, is really important. There are lots of papers saying how some are better than others, etc. And while that can be useful to understand, it's also useful to understand that actually using each of them to their, what's their like top, I can't think of how to say what I'm trying to say. Um, they each has its own benefits,
Mhm.
right?
Correct.
And being able to use them to their benefits. So we used a thermal camera, which
Mhm.
was really useful for actually deciphering behaviors when we'd spotted something. And sometimes if you only see the eye shine of a species in, they're quite far back, you can use the thermal camera to then roughly gauge which species it is. You might not know between squirrels, but you might be able to tell it's a tarsier. So that was important. And then we also had our red lights. And we use red lights rather than white spotlights because most nocturnal mammals can't even see red wavelengths. We think some can, tarsiers probably can, but most of them can't. So it's just less disturbance immediately. It's actually easier on the human eye too, um, because you are not asking your brain to use too much energy trying to see. Really, it gives you more of a peripheral vision. Um, it's to do with the cones and the rods in your eyes and which ones you're using at night. So the red light's useful because we also feel like we're doing much better for the animals, less harm. And actually, there are papers now detailing that you get better detection at night. So that's super cool. And that's still, I think, being worked on. And in Loris research, it's also been used for, I think, like at least 12 years now. And it's so, when I was choosing the survey design, I was like, thermal cameras are going to be useful, red light to make it easier to detect. And then I also had a microphone that records both audible and ultrasound. So I was obviously also trying to see if we could get bioacoustics in there. Because again, by using all these technologies, you are giving yourself the best chance of getting as much data as possible. Sometimes we see the animal first with the red light because it maybe hits their eye shine and you see an eye, but then maybe you need the thermal camera to discern which species. Um, and sometimes you hear first. It's all very like a nice little mixture of technologies to use. And then on top of that, I, I'm not from Sabah. And I wanted to make sure, although I had some volunteers that came from different places to help me, my main research assistant works at the RDC. And I think that was super important. I was very keen on making sure it was someone who was familiar with the place. They're from they're from Sabah, it's part of their life, it's part of their home, and their knowledge is just just amazing. Like, you know, from like a mile off, JT can hear the sounds of certain animals. He can spot things just, and for safety, that's also useful because there are some safety things like fire ants on the ground, or like there's some pit vipers that are dangerous. You don't want to like accidentally put your hand near. And so, yeah, okay, that's very useful, but actually their knowledge about the animals is super useful, and being able to like work with him to turn it from just kind of knowledge and observations he's had over his life doing night walks, we've been able to like translate that also into actually what's the science of this. And when I said I was recording things, that's why he was pointing out things. And when we did hear, because there was a period of time where we think it was mating season for the red giant flying squirrels, and he was just pointing out them calling. Um, and so I think it's so important to really make sure local knowledge is included, it's valued, it's not just an outsider coming in and saying, hey, this is my scientific procedure and this is how we do it. It's about working together. And on that, like, I worked with the RDC. They are an eco center, so they do a lot of teaching for like kids. They have junior rangers, they have adult workshops for all different things. I made sure to get involved. Like I did a junior ranger training session. We actually did a nocturnal tourism workshop with Dr. Miard as well. So it's really about getting involved and not just being, I love to just be in the forest, by myself at night, obviously with JT as well, because very good research assistant. But I also love that we get to involve the people. We get to teach these, junior rangers who don't get to go out into the forest at night. That's because, it's a safety thing. It's also, there's a lot of worry about like if there's ghosts and spirits and stuff. And, I like to make sure that people know that, if there are, well, they've been treating me good. I say thank you to the forest spirits. Like every time I went into the forest, because if they are there, then I do want to thank them for letting me research and study how cool it is to work in the forest.
That is so amazing. I think, when we go into the trees, the old trees especially, there's so many old trees here where we live, and you just feel different because they've been there for more than our lifetimes, and they've seen nature, they've seen so many things, you just don't know, right? That's amazing. And the RDC seems to be an amazing place to go. Like when you were saying, I was remembering the Predator movie. Remember the Predator movie where people are going in?
Yeah.
It feels like, oh my, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that, and I'm trying to use this camera. It's amazing. You're taking us in a journey, and I think the people, especially the non-researchers that's going to listen to this podcast and your video would kind of get intrigued by how exciting the research is, how exciting the field work is, right? So You are,
Yeah.
what you have done is simply amazing. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of teamwork that comes into all of this. And you're right, local knowledge helps. They know they've been there, living there with them, seeing them. That's fantastic. So when in the link that we're going to put together, there's a lot of data that you have collected, right? And there's a map of
Hmm.
the RDC and how their trails are. I think I would encourage everybody to kind of see how you kind of plan your research, how the technology you use. So I really encourage everybody to take a deep dive into how difficult is hard it is to come to the conclusions and to move the research forward. So that's wonderful. So what's next now? Like, there's so much work. You have moved the needle forward. You actually provided some data. You found some interesting. You first recorded a sound of a flying squirrel. So where do we go from here? Like, what's next? I know I think you're starting you're expanding your research and going into a higher PhD, I think, right? So what's next for you?
Yeah, so obviously I've fallen in love with my nocturnal mammals. I mean, the love did start a while ago because I did a placement year when I was at university. I went to Java and worked with the Little Fireface project on Java and slow lorises, and that's where I first like fell in love. And obviously, as you can see, I've now done a master's where I focused on that as my research. And me and Dr. Priscillia, we're part of, well, Priscillia set up the night spotting project out in Malaysia, and that's basically the project where we focus on all these different amazing species. And I am now a research coordinator for this, and so hopefully we are just setting up all these amazing projects. She works with the university, so like you can get students in and things like that. But on my side of it, I'm looking to, well, I'm writing another paper first. I'm working on Colugo bioacoustics. I am also hopefully going to do some more Colugo work this year. I really need to be back in the field. But yeah, I'd like to go into a PhD. I am thinking of doing a bioacoustics PhD. I haven't decided exactly which species or if it's going to be a multitude of species. There's things to iron out there, like work it out exactly. But research in terms of flying squirrels, well, we've already started on the next step. Last year, a flying squirrel project at the RDC was set up um, with a student who they've been collecting data on predominantly the red giant flying squirrels. Um, so we're looking into like multiple things, right? So being able to track them is handy, so you can check, where they're sleeping, their activity levels, if they're stressed, also checking the difference between red light, white light. And the RDC's a pretty great place because it's so easy and accessible. And they have a 25-meter canopy walkway, which really helps because some of those squirrels love to be really high up in the trees. And some of these trees are like over 50 meters high. Like, whew, sometimes your neck gets quite sore from looking up. And it gives you just a little bit of relief sometimes to not have to look up quite as high. So, and with the black flying squirrel, which is something that we've finally got like some acoustics for, I would love to expand that. I hope that gets to go forward. There is some research around the rest of Asia on certain flying squirrel species, giant ones. There's not as much on the smaller species either. That's predominantly the smaller species that have had studies on are in North America. So something that would be good is to figure out how to be doing some small flying squirrel studies as well going forward. So that's what we're kind of hoping to do is just find what we can, find funding where we can. If students want to do it, if people want to volunteer and help, that's really what the night spotting project is about, is trying to just involve people in learning about all these cool species.
That is so amazing. I think this is so, and the passion, you need passion to do research. Like, there has to be
Yeah.
you gotta love what you're doing, right? And I think that's really what you embody and bring forward. And I think all these budding researchers, they should really, look at the way you have approached research as a passionate project, right? Sorry, you were trying to highlight something. Yeah.
Well, I think passion's super important because it is hard work.
Yes.
It I'm not gonna sit here and say every day was fun and every day it was amazing, but it is amazing. And it is, but there are days where you are tired, you are boiling, you are sweating, you're like, I've not seen anything tonight, you're out for hours at a time, you really have to focus. Sometimes the data analysis can just be tiring and hard, and writing can be difficult, but that comes with research. And the joy you feel when you're in the field is so just great. And I personally love data analysis. I know not everyone does, but I love it because I love being able to take something that you've, or someone else, because sometimes you analyze for other people's work, you analyze it and you get to see what that actually means and like what we can do with that and how we can apply it to conservation, because it's super cool just researching things. I love it. But part of what I like about it is that we are looking to see, for with like the flying squirrels, is, are they feed dispersers? What role do they play? We need funding to be able to do these studies. Does white light impact them? Does red light impact them? Doing all these extra studies is so valuable for us to be able to save not only them, but other species, similar species in other countries. I think it's really important to know how to apply it to conservation as well. My paper was a very, kind of observation paper. It's very heavy on the we saw this, we saw that, and not over interpreting what that means. It's getting the data out there so that we can say, hey, look, now we need to go find out why and what this means and how can we protect these animals.
Yeah, I think one of the things when I read the paper, it was focused on squirrels, yes, but also it provided a framework. It provided a framework for how to do research for difficult species and how to use the technology to arrive at a conclusion. So I think what you rightly pointed out, the framework and the structure and the technologies and the methods that you use to arrive can be applied anywhere. It doesn't have to be applied here, but you can expand that to other species. Obviously, there'll be some tweaks required. So I think there's a lot of learning, not only on your subject matter per se, but also on the overall scheme of things. You have a framework, you have a structure now set up that that allow you to answer big questions about habitats, about extinction of a species in a particular local environment. It can tell you so much things about what we can do for conservation, how we can make things better, and not expand our footprint and create more damage that we're doing already to the flora and fauna around us. Now, so I think it's a much more bigger problem you're trying to solve by creating these specialized methods, which are very specific to nocturnal animals, which
Mm.
play an important role in maintaining the ecosystem, growing the ecosystem, maybe as a seed spreader, as you mentioned in your paper, and many other things. So it has much more bigger impact than your paper, which is very obviously specific to squirrel, but has a bigger framework to look at, right?
I think what was kind of cool about that is that that's because my actual thesis was based on uh, a wider nocturnal survey. So we were really trying to make sure we could figure out methods that would help us get as much data as possible and really to create like an inventory so that we kind of understand, like, in that area what's going on so that we can then do further study. And you know being able to know that there's three giant flying squirrel species there was important because you now know that they all coexist together. I even on one observation saw a, a Thomas's flying squirrel and a red giant flying squirrel on the same tree. So I think like it's just it's cool because a paper might be specific to a species or something. You can take so much from it. And I think that's part of being a researcher too, because I'm not perfect. You know, my methods aren't perfect. They're coming from recent research on improving methods at night, because again, it's, we're talking, the last decade or so, it's getting better. We're understanding more how we can do it in a good way for the animals' well-being, and also to collect good data. And just, you know, I I think it's just so important to really, like, when you read papers and you do that, is to just be like, wow, what could this be applied to? What can
Totally.
we do with this? How can we make this work for other species? How can we apply this to conservation? How can we get other kind of branches of the science involved? We're talking about them eating fruit and seed dispersal. There must be, botanists and, all these amazing people that are good at forestry. They're important, and they are important. We used the water. I can't say that word. It's not gonna happen. I don't have to say it. We used the Rainforest Discovery Center have their own, like, plant specialists, and that's, how we actually even identified what they were feeding on, because we found the trees and they went and found the plants and they identified them for us. I know expert on local trees, particularly the rainforest. There's thousands of species.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's just so, like, yeah, it's, yeah,
Yeah, no, this is so amazing. I think you've taken us a journey from conceptualizing your research to actually executing the field work, your thesis about what the research what the analysis means. You actually laid out a framework of how we can take your research and extend it further and what more needs to be done. And I think, as a researchers, we don't know. And that's a powerful thing. If we knew, we wouldn't do any research. So I think we don't know is actually good. And that's really the motivation for finding out the answers. Like that's the fun part is to go out there, dig hard, find people who can help, stand and look up the big canopy trees as you mentioned, and kind of come out with a conclusion that actually moves the agenda forward, and then and make the people interested further to support you, funding, expand the research, get more people involved. So it's a lot of hard work. This paper is only 10 pages, but there is thousands and thousands of hours and so many people that have gone into making this paper a reality. And I think that's what we want to convey to the people out there, saying when you look at the
yeah,
papers, it is not an 8-page document. It's so much stuff goes behind it. Every paper, has something unique about it. That's why it's written. That's why it's been reviewed. So I think you have done an amazing work, and there's going to more papers coming out from you. I'm sure there's going to be something spectacular that we'll learn from you, Safi, and your team. Please convey thanks to your supervisors and your funders for all the hard work they have supported you with your studies. All the best for your PhD.
That was an interesting paper and interview. Hope you liked it. Please follow the links to review the research in further details. Please like, share and subscribe. Also, here is a quick snapshot of our work. See you next time.